Story 1. Range of motion in your musculoskeletal system. When muscles remain in one position for hours every day, they adapt to that position. Then you say that your neck is tight or sore. Story 2, for example, in the military and in many government agencies, if a department does not spend its allotted budget for the year, the expectation is that it will receive less money the following year. To avoid this, departments purchase expensive printers, laptops, and other equipment at the end of the fiscal year to use up their funds. This practice occurs in many lines of work and is discouraging. Story 3. Fitness, for sure. My mother is a physical therapist. She used to have patients in their 70s who could move like 20-somethings because they had been exercising their whole lives. These people could run marathons. Most people in their 70s cannot even run a mile anymore. Story 4. If you do not use your muscles, they will atrophy. Story 5. Take your annual leave from your job if it does not roll over. Use your leave. You have earned it. Story 6. Speaking a second or third language can be challenging. I was fluent in French just a few years ago, but now I sometimes forget simple words. Story 7. This is about regaining motor function after a stroke. I had a catastrophic stroke in 2017. It took me 17 months of work, but now I can walk unassisted. Those 17 months included 7 months in a wheelchair, 5 months using a walker, and 5 months using a cane. It is not a normal gait, but I can get wherever I need to go without help. I met an older man who had a stroke when he was younger. He practiced using a walker for a while, but he told his doctor the chair was much easier for him. The doctor told him to just use the chair. This was in the 1980s when not much was known about neuroplasticity. He has been in a wheelchair ever since and now has little chance of walking because his brain is not trying to form new connections. Neuroplasticity is absolutely incredible. I had heard of it before my stroke, but it is more impactful than I could have imagined. My wife made a video of the first year of my recovery. Story 8. I work as an order picker in a warehouse. On an average day, I take 36,000 to 40,000 steps. The week before Christmas, we started inventory and I was on the cherry picker all week. After that, I had several days off for Christmas and New Year's. I was off all of Christmas week because I was sick, so I went almost 3 full weeks without moving like I usually do. I was very sore when we returned to work. Story 9. In any athletic sport, if you are good and never practice, you will get worse or simply plateau. Story 10. I played trombone for a long time and then stopped. When I tried again after 10 years, my embouchure had atrophied and I could not play. Story 11. I used to draw very well, mainly portraits, but I stopped because of university and then working in corporate America. I can no longer do it. Feels like I never had that skill. My eyesight has gotten significantly worse, and I can no longer see details. Story 12. Stamina and strength in older adults decline naturally near the end of life. Older adults who do not address this can become couch potatoes, unable to walk far, climb stairs, or get up from the floor or ground after a fall. The result is severe loss of independence. Once strength and stamina are lost, recovery is extremely difficult. Attempts to regain them are often painful with very small gains, so the effort becomes too daunting for many. Any gains that do accumulate will quickly disappear if the exercise stops. This decline is directly tied to movement. Staying active supports life and function, while inactivity accelerates decline. Death comes when we slow down so much that we stop moving altogether. For older adults, move it or lose it is literally about staying alive. Story 13. This is a specific situation. I have arthritis and avoided walking because of the pain. As a result, first, I gained a great deal of weight, which made walking even harder. Second, my joints became progressively worse. With arthritis, you need to keep using those joints or the condition worsens. I am in a wheelchair and barely able to reach the toilet. I can only blame myself. Story 14. This applies to everything except knowing how to ride a bike. Story 15. Communicating with people has been challenging. I got out of practice with small talk and deeper conversation because of pandemic isolation, so I returned to Toastmasters. Now I lead our club and must open and close every meeting. I am much more comfortable, but I still struggle with opening with a casual bit. I hope to get better. I used to be much better at it. Story 16. For people with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, everything matters. If we are not using it, we lose it. Sometimes we lose it even when we are using it. Story 17. Playing a musical instrument. I learned to play the piano as a child and continued into my 20s. Then I did not have the opportunity to play for a long time. When I finally sat back down at the piano, my fingers did not cooperate and I made basic mistakes even on a simple tune. Story 18. The Slav squat is a classic example. Children can do it. People who use squat toilets or who squat every day can do it. Most adult Americans and many people who use Western-style sitting toilets and have easy access to chairs usually cannot. When I do barbell squats, I must have something under my heels because I am so inflexible. Another example is getting up after a fall for older adults. Falling is especially problematic for many older adults in Western countries because they cannot get up afterward. In countries where people sleep on mats on the floor, this is not usually a problem unless a bone is broken. Story 19. There is a type of ice cream snack that has caused a lot of people to get their knickers in a twist recently because it will stop being sold. Every person who is outraged at the loss of this national treasure claims they buy one about once a year or every 3 months. People do not like change or reminders that they are getting older. This happens all the time with chocolate bars and high street shops. People miss them when they are gone but never cared enough to keep them viable. Story 20. Artistic ability will fade and decay. You can, in fact, forget how to ride a bike. Story 21. Physical activity, including stretching and regular use of your muscles, is important to prevent pain and loss of mobility. Story 22. Among transgender women, this is common advice about the genital area. Feminizing hormone replacement therapy causes muscle atrophy throughout the body, and it affects the genital muscles in particular. For many transgender women, this is not a problem because they generally do not use their genitals. However, if you are seeking gender-affirming genital surgery, regular use may be necessary because severe atrophy can reduce the tissue available for vaginoplasty. As a result, transgender women who experience genital dysphoria often have to tolerate discomfort and continue to stimulate or exercise the genital muscles, because it is essentially use it or lose it. Story 23. The people you love are the easiest to take for granted while you have them, and that is what you will most regret. Story 24. Your mobility. The more you move now, the longer you will be able to move. Story 25. I found a calculus exam I had taken about 15 years ago and had no idea what it meant, but it received an A+, laughing out loud. Story 26. Your body. I met an older man at the gym who said he is 75 and wants to be flexible enough to still be able to cut his toenails when he is 90. That made me think. Move it and use it or lose it. Story 27. When I was a kid, my family from the United States moved to Italy. My parents wanted a little translator, so they put me into an Italian public school from the time I was 8 until I was 11. Learning a new language well enough to attend school and make friends was very difficult, but by the end of my first year I had become fluent. By the end of my third year I was as close to a native speaker as I could get. When school let out for the summer, we moved back to the United States and I did not get to speak Italian anymore. Over the course of a week, I went from using Italian for 90% of my communication to not using it at all. None of my family had bothered to learn because I had always been able to translate for them, so I simply stopped speaking Italian. Now, 26 years later, I cannot string together a sentence. Story 28. Paid time off accrues slowly over the course of a year and is forfeited at the end of the year. The company cannot understand why everyone tries to take time off in December. Story 29. I am a physiotherapist. Usually I would say movement, but that feels too broad for this, so I will narrow it down to just stairs. If you value being able to walk up and down stairs when you are older, do not get a bungalow. Story 30. Unused money loses value. Unused talent fades. Unused potential decays. Idle machinery deteriorates. Unused time is lost. Unused knowledge becomes a burden. What is not used is abused. The tragedy of life is not death itself, but the resources that perish within you while you are still alive. Use them or you will lose them. Story 31. Your muscles support and protect your skeleton and joints. I realize everyone is busy, and common advice says that walking or light housework is enough exercise, but it is not. If you do not maintain your core, healthcare professionals may need to perform surgery and fuse structures in ways nature did not intend. Story 32. Foreign languages are a major challenge. I have not lost much fluency, but I struggle to produce vocabulary and grammatical structures. It is frustrating. If you are not in a community where people speak the language, or if you have trouble keeping up with friends, you will lose some ability. It is not that bad to relearn. It returns quickly with practice. As for musical instruments, I have a lot of trouble regaining previous skill levels. Story 33. I used to play guitar and maybe other instruments. I forgot how long it had been since I last played, but when I tried my nephew's acoustic guitar, my fingers hurt so badly I couldn't even play chords. The worst part was that his parents had always said I was good at it. His frustration was clear when I couldn't even remember pieces like Fur Elise. Story 34. A house in California. Californians take the squatting crisis into their own hands. Newsweek. Story 35. Vacation time that exceeds the amount permitted to be rolled over to the following year. Story 36. Superhero studios keep producing terrible films to avoid losing the rights to the characters. Story 37. Your body. I spent the years after coronavirus disease 2019 being mostly sedentary and not exercising at all. By the fall of 2024, my endurance and lung capacity were shot. I would get winded climbing the stairs. I had problems with my shoulders, my blood pressure was borderline high, and my mood was low. I have been working with a personal trainer for 10 weeks, and the difference is dramatic. The shoulder problem is gone, my blood pressure has improved measurably, and I just feel better all around. We evolved to climb, walk, run, push, pull, and lift. Doing almost none of that and sitting around all day means your body eventually no longer functions as it should, and it affects more than just your ability to do a pull-up. It also affects digestion, sleep, mood, and other systems. I knew all of this, but I was not expecting the improvements to be so obvious and rapid. Story 38. Physical fitness. Now in my mid-50s, I find that if I take a break of a week or so from exercising, I deteriorate very quickly, even when I am just walking a couple of miles. Stay in motion, fellow members of Generation X. Story 39. Sometimes the remaining money in the budget is lost. Sometimes it rolls over. Worst of all, if you don't spend the full budget, next year's allocation is reduced to what was actually spent. Story 40. Music skills. I am a music teacher, and the drop-off over the summer for students who do not practice is surprising. Story 41. I cannot remember how to play a musical instrument. Do not stop playing if you know how. Story 42. My company gives my team a travel budget each year. Every December we scramble to ensure that any travel for January and February can be planned, booked, and paid before the end of the year in case we have leftover money. Story 43. Insurance benefits do not roll over into the next year. They simply renew. Story 44. Having been brought up in a Gaelic environment, when I went to primary school the policy was English only, and every time I spoke Gaelic or Scots I had the yardstick brought down on my hand. I still have the scars. I lost the confidence to speak Gaelic, though I can still understand most of it, especially when it is written down. I went to primary school 50 years ago. Scottish schools now have a more enlightened attitude. Story 45. Credit cards. Many issuers review your credit limit and may even close your account if you do not use it. Check your terms and conditions and your bank inboxes. Story 46. Instrumental ability varies. A specific example is brass instruments, especially the trumpet. If you do not play an instrument, for example the piano, for a long time you will likely lose coordination in your arms and hands. Guitarists lose their calluses. The trumpet is especially unforgiving in this regard. A few months ago I got sick and did not play for just over a week. When I returned, I sounded awful and the mouthpiece felt foreign. It took a while to regain my previous level. The trumpet uses small, delicate facial muscles that atrophy quickly when not used. Too much practice or playing while your embouchure is tired can cause injury. Those muscles need rest like any other. Taking a day off is sometimes beneficial, especially after a heavy week of playing, but for the most part the trumpet requires daily maintenance practice. I tell people, especially those who play piano, guitar, or bass and want to take up the trumpet as a side instrument, that it does not work well as a casual instrument you pick up once in a while. It requires daily maintenance practice and does not provide instant gratification for beginners. Story 47. Aside from those who never wanted to use it, I know many people who were relatively smart growing up and studied hard but then stopped learning after school. It's noticeable. Story 48. Your back and core muscles weaken if you sit all day, increasing your risk of a back injury. Story 49. Young people, do not work so hard that you forget to enjoy yourself. You only get one life. Story 50. I was surprised as an adult to discover how wobbly I was on a bicycle. I never imagined my sense of balance could fade. Story 51. If you lose an adult tooth, the bone it was connected to will stop being stimulated and will shrink. Story 52. Your brain is like that. If you don't constantly use knowledge and refresh it, you forget. I was an expert in my anatomy and physiology class in college. I dropped out, and now I don't even remember the Krebs cycle. Story 53. Gift cards. If you do not use them, some retailers charge a monthly fee that can reduce the balance to zero, or the store may go out of business and the cards become worthless. Story 54. Drumming. Once you stop, it is hard to get back into the rhythm. Story 55. Young people do things within reason and seek forgiveness later, because when you are an adult you are accountable whether you like it or not. Story 56. I used to be able to use a controller. I played high-level competitive shooters, then I switched to a personal computer and reached about the same skill level on it. Now I cannot even aim a gun properly or move correctly with a controller. Story 57. I used to be able to use a controller. I played high-level competitive shooters and then switched to playing on a personal computer, where I reached about the same skill level. Now I cannot even aim a gun properly or move correctly with a controller. Story 58. I recently lost a Google Mail account that I created more than 10 years ago and never used. Story 59. Paid sick time. Most employers pay out unused annual leave when you quit, but not unused sick leave. Use sick time for mental health days. Story 60. I never used my breasts to produce milk, so I have never lactated. It is one of my saddest regrets. I imagine many other men feel the same way. Story 61. I lived in Germany for 2 years and studied the language. I picked it up well enough to be functional. After I moved back to the United States, I had few opportunities to use it and have lost most of it. German is not easy to learn, and it is easy to forget. Story 62. Enjoy your youth. Live it up, try new things, and discover what you really love in life. Story 63. Drumming. About 15 years ago, I quit playing gigs after gigging intensely for about a decade. I only took recording dates from then on, which was very part-time since I am mostly a recording engineer. I did not practice much during that time because I was burned out. For a couple of years I could still pull it off pretty well, but starting about 8 years ago I noticed my skills deteriorating. It did not bother me at first, but the longer I went the more the skills faded. At a certain point I realized that not only were my abilities reduced, but my confidence was gone. I could still handle playing on other people's records, but it took more effort to really nail it. I have started practicing again and it comes back pretty quickly, moving from feeling like I suck to feeling that things are okay. I doubt I will ever get back to where I was when I was playing several times per week unless someone hires me for their band, which is unlikely. Story 64. Your heart is a muscle. If you exercise it regularly, it becomes strong and works well. If you do not exercise, it becomes weak and works poorly. If it becomes too weak, it can fail and lead to death. Story 65. I was trying to sell a device I developed to a very large company. They wanted it delivered before the end of their budget period, but it was not finished. They asked me to deliver the empty enclosure, and they would then return it to me for repair. In the end, everything worked out fine for both parties. Story 66. My physique used to be thinner. Lack of exercise has left me with a chubbier shape. Story 67. The ability to delay gratification can be regained, but it becomes increasingly difficult with age. The ability to solve complex problems also declines. Story 68. My singing voice has changed. I used to be able to hit a high E above high C, but I can no longer. It is strange to try now to sing what used to be so natural. My voice just says no. Story 69. Muscle atrophy is a terrible thing. Language skills, including math, are important. Story 70. I used to be fluent in English, proficient in Spanish, and conversational in French and American Sign Language. Now I speak only English. Story 71. I used to play the clarinet and the guitar and sing in choirs. I no longer remember how to read music. Story 72. I played the violin for about 10 years, then stopped for another 10. I no longer tell people I can play. I sound like a dying cat. Story 73. Athletic ability. I've been very fit for most of my life, but I had a serious brain problem that put me in the hospital for several months. When I returned home, I lacked the coordination to do much, so I spent days on the couch watching television. Now that I can do things again, I get out of breath after a second doing what I used to do for hours. It can be regained, but it is extremely frustrating. Story 74. Muscles. I used to be a semi-professional athlete training 30 hours per week. 6 of those hours were in the weight room. I had to quit my sport and did not lift weights for 8 months. I went from a 45-pound dumbbell press to a 25-pound dumbbell press, 25-pound curls to 10-pound curls, and a 120-pound lat pull-down to a 90-pound lat pull-down. Consistency is key. Story 75. An unused parking brake in a car will seize when it is first used. At that time, the cable will have to be cut and replaced. I use my parking brake every time I park any of my vehicles. Story 76. The muscles in your feet make walking comfortable. Too many people rely on shoes. Story 77. I used to skateboard at several parks near my house while growing up. During the coronavirus pandemic, I went to an empty park, tried to skate down a bank, and took a bad fall. After that, I realized I probably cannot do this anymore. Story 78. I like any snack or food in my house for more than 5 seconds after it arrives. Story 79. Driving without assistance. My dad tried to drive my car and kept drifting onto the rumble strip because he is so used to a beep warning him. He almost hit another car while parking, and I had to guide him without the backup camera. I do not want a car with all those features because I do not want to be forced to go full cyborg every time I drive. Story 80. Critical thinking. I do not know about any of those big words you used, but how about the ball game last night? I was on the edge of my seat until the very end. Story 81. After not singing for years, when you finally sing for a special occasion for your partner, it is horribly off-key and she points it out. Story 82. I was really good at math as a kid. I was 3 years ahead doing high school math in primary school. I never did anything with it because I had behavior issues due to my undiagnosed attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I later went to university as an adult, earned a degree in another field, and became a high school performing arts teacher. The other day at work, I needed to talk to a Year 9 student, 13 years old, in my country. I found her in math class. She was sitting with a group of kids who were all struggling with the work. The teacher already had her hands full with other students, so the group asked me to help them. I sat down and looked at the work. It was incredibly basic. This was the lowest level class for students who struggle. I was able to help a little, but most of the problems I could not do. I am still good with numbers, but it was geometry and required remembering specific formulas, which I could not recall. I could work out the area of a square, and that was about it. Story 83. I worked in grant-funded nonprofits. It was understood that supplies and equipment were purchased at the end of each fiscal cycle because you expected to reach the end and deliver the services promised in the grant I wrote. Returning money was considered poor management, and the agency providing the grant or matching funds agreed. Story 84. Sense of balance. You need to move both up and down and side to side, or you will lose your balance. When that happens, you stop moving and the problem snowballs. Story 85. Knowledge of a new technical product often fades. You take classes and learn it, but if you never use it at work, you forget it. Story 86. People who are not sexually active often start using erectile dysfunction medication about a decade earlier. Story 87. I used to be able to play multiple instruments. Now I cannot. Story 88. ARC Geographic Information System Pro, an environment for visualizing images for all my map-making folks out there. Story 89. Muscle atrophy occurs when you stop using a body part. You will lose muscle mass in that area. Story 90. Libraries. Even if all you do is get a library card and hardly use it, or better yet check out and return one book a year, you are helping your local libraries send a message to your council and your government that the library is a necessary part of local infrastructure. Libraries house books, but they are about much more than reading. Libraries are free and open to everyone. They host free events, groups, and programs that are vital to our communities. Libraries are warm and safe. You can also use the same library card for apps where you can read and listen to audiobooks for free. Story 91. Playing a musical instrument can be challenging. Horns and wind instruments are far less forgiving than others. Story 92. Vestibular tolerance. Do you get dizzy more often now? Welcome to older age. Story 93. Target practice, as with a ranged weapon, is a perishable skill. You must keep practicing to maintain it. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.